Welcome back to the Discovering Eden podcast. My name is Brandon,
And I'm Jonathan.
and we're tired.
It's been a long week, but we're still here.
Still here, still kicking.
Well, I don't know about. Ow! I didn't expect you to actually kick me. I was gonna say I don't know about kicking, but Brandon's obviously kicking. I don't know if I can lift my legs enough to kick.
You do a pirouette instead.
Pirouette. I'm not ballerina.
Little did he know.
It's in the cards for the future, I can tell. All right. That was a moment of silence. We should probably get to prayer because we need it.
Because our time has died.
Yeah. And that'll be it for Discovering Eden. We'll see you next week. Toodles.
Anyway.
Yes, I think it's my turn to pray.
Yeah.
Lord, we just we thank you for this time to gather together to discuss these deeper topics. Lord, I pray that you guide this conversation, and that anything that's from us and not from you, Lord, that it falls to the ground and is forgotten. Lord, I pray for wisdom and discernment as we enter this discussion, but also for grace, Lord, as I'm sure we will fumble and bumble because of the aforementioned exhaustion that has gripped us this week. So, Lord, I just pray for your guiding hand and as we engage in this discussion. Amen.
Amen. All right, we'll get into the bumper before I forget, and then we'll get right into the conversation today.
Don't be so tired that you play the creatures bumper.
That would be funny, though.
It would be fun. Oh, we're back.
Speaking of mad ramblings,
We were talking about H.P. Lovecraft during the bumper.
yeah, it's fine. Everything's fine. We creatures, whatever. Anyway, so this week, it's I put it off 1 week before, which is we're gonna be talking about the spiritual and physical realms, particularly the spiritual realm, and kind of the similarity, like the not similarities in this. What's different about them? There we go.
So the differences.
Yep.
Not the similarities.
Whatever you want to say, because clearly I can't.
The pros and cons.
Yep.
I
It's
can't
been
think of any other type of list.
it's just the do's and
The
don'ts.
grocery list. The do's and don'ts. Yeah.
Anyways, when you think of spiritual realm,
Mm-hmm.
what's the first thing you think of?
In terms just in general? Or
Just in general.
angels, demons, Persona 5.
Persona.
Like, I'm not
5.
even joking. I mean, like, so much of that. And I know I touched on it a little bit in the Creature series, but so much of it revolves around, myth and folklore. And anything kind of in that realm, I kind of associate with the spiritual realm, or whatever you want to call it, in a general sense.
I mean, you brought up Persona 5. What I think of like possibly even like Legend of Korra,
Okay, yeah.
like Avatar: The Last Airbender kind of thing, where they have that whole
Elemental system.
elemental. Yeah, they have the whole spiritual. They have the spiritual world and then the physical, and there's kind of, and then there ends up being a connection between the two, and then chaos ensues. But that's besides the point.
Spiritomb.
Spiritomb. Yeah, that doesn't really fit all that much, does it?
Well, I mean, it's got spirit in the name.
Anyways.
You can't tell. We're stalling.
I mean, I know where I want to go with this eventually,
Mhm.
because I do have stories and different things that I
Mhm.
can say. Like, I will say as a disclaimer, they're not my stories.
Mm.
They're stories I've heard in passing, and I wouldn't say I witnessed some of these, although one can be close because I've seen it, but not seen it, if that makes any sense.
Not at the moment, but I'm sure you're going to enlighten us.
I know I alluded. Well, I didn't allude, but I had some of the other stories that I shared earlier. That I also would classify under being in of the spiritual
Mm.
realm. I think of my time like Mackinac City with the whole cabin and
Yeah, which you
everything
talked about
there.
last week.
To me, that's a spiritual realm,
Experience.
physical realm kind of mix in between the 2. It just took in the form of like dream vision. However, some of these things can be vision while you're obviously still awake, and some of these things are happening. And especially with what we're going to be talking next week, which has a lot more structure. In fairness,
So he says.
well, it's a lot more structured than this one because, I mean, at the end of the day, when you talk to someone, what's the spiritual realm look like?
Spiritum.
Spiritual?
Yeah.
Like, there's nothing really that you can explain in terms of our comprehension of it.
Yeah. I think people would honestly kind of go in a, like how I did in a very general sense, like angels, demons, maybe ghosts, or that kind of general direction
So
of
kind of like paranormal
I
kind
think
of
that's
things.
kind of where most people, if you just ask them in a general sense, tell me what you would think.
Like, I even think of back to the Halloween or whatever episode where we talked about wow, I can't even think of the name. The name of
Can
the
you just
original. What was the original thing?
holiday?
Yeah, the holiday or whatever. Well, it wasn't a holiday, but
Like the
Celtic and
peg, yeah.
yeah.
Was it Doulahan?
No, that was name of one of the creatures.
No, not Doulahan. Doulahan, I think, was a.
No, Doulahan's like the headless uh
Is it?
horseman or whatever,
Well, now I'm lost.
or the knight or whatever.
Oh yeah.
I don't know why I can't think of it. We did it before. It's just the name is escaping me. But with kind of the mixed reality of kind of the
Samhain.
Sanheim. Okay,
Yeah.
That. Where kind of this blurred reality between physical and spiritual kind of thing, and that happens in other cultures as well, not just in the pagan thing, obviously. But there's always been some sort of tie. You see even within history, within the spiritual and physical. You look back to ancient Egypt, they view very spiritual, like Egyptians were very spiritual, to the point where you protect the the pharaoh who died, who goes to the afterlife, and they want to be with all their things that they had accumulated in the life, and they want to take it with them, so you bury it with them. Different
I'm
things
not
like
gonna
that.
make that joke. I was gonna say, so the Pharaoh's a material girl.
Living in a material world, man.
I guess I did make the joke. I lied. Sorry.
And that's where the difference, like for Egypt, for example, comes with the Christian narrative. And for people who don't know, the relationship between Christianity and ancient Egyptian is actually quite similar in a way. There's a lot of similarities, even going so far back as like the tabernacle and everything like that. All the temples and everything that are written like in the Bible were almost mirrored after uh Egyptian temples.
Mm.
So there is a lot in the fact that Moses kind of grew up
In Egypt.
in Egypt, basically under Pharaoh,
Right.
and learning all of that. So the spiritual side has always been kind of intertwined
Sure.
with the Christian faith, but where it takes a different step away from, say, the Egyptians, like for Christians, for Jews or whatever, the material, they don't go with you when you die. They're gone. Like there is a separation. It's kind of hard to explain, and I'm not doing a very good job of it, clearly. But
You're doing fine. It's I guess I don't know. I had something and then I lost it. Just ignore me. Keep going.
noted. Boom, roasted. I'm kidding. Now I lost my train of thought.
Oh,
So
congrats.
we're stationless.
We need to get like a background, where it's just like, please stand by, or like hang in there, baby, when we reconsider all of our life choices.
Yeah.
So Egyptian mythology and Christian belief. We're talking about how they're intertwined, but there's a
well, yeah.
separation.
There's a divide. Because I don't even know
Well,
where
I
I
mean,
was going
the
with it. I was
Christian
just
faith, I mean, you were kind of talking like,
I'm trying to
obviously,
get from point A to point B and doing a terrible job at it.
the Egyptians thought that they could take their stuff with them to the afterlife. Obviously, that's not a belief in Christian faith. I would argue even that, we're called to kind of relinquish our material things to an extent.
Well, I guess we'll spin it this way. So, okay. So if the Egyptians wanted to, bring material possessions into the afterlife, and obviously this is just us talking, don't actually is it actually professionally accurate or everything
we are
like that?
we are this is brain dumping right now to get back on track.
or brain dumping, but trying to get things back on track. So what could you bring to the spiritual realm? Because I'd argue there is something that you can bring, although with assistance.
Yeah, my mind jumps to soul, which is not something that you can necessarily see, taste, touch, feel, at least in a physical sense.
Like, and that's kind of where I was gonna go with it, with like our souls and different things. What can you enter into the spiritual realm with? It's our spiritual, like, in order to see into the spiritual realm, you have to have a spiritual sense.
Sure.
And that spiritual sense can only be active if we're looking.
Yeah.
And the one way we can get into kind of that spiritual sense is if we're like believing in the spiritual things. So whether that be angels, demons, paranormal activity, whatever you want to think there.
Yeah, and I mean that ties back to something that we touched on in the creatures. You've got nations like Japan that were very heightened to a spiritual something.
Spiritual awareness.
Awareness. Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. What that was, I don't know. I mean, I don't know. But
a lot of it,
something there.
A lot of it, I think, goes back into what you can, wrap your mind around, and what, your culture
kind of perception being reality.
Yeah,
sort of thing.
So, like, in the sense of going back to the Nagas, for example, well, they already, like, the people in that area kind of already had a perception or stories in and around that kind of vein. Whereas, let's say in Europe, for example, you had dragons and different things like that as a personification of it,
Mhm.
whereas the other is more serpentine. This is going back to dragons, but I digress.
That's all right. We know you love dragons.
um, Suffice to say that basically the perception can alter our viewpoint of
Sure.
different things
100%.
in the spiritual realm, because spiritual realm doesn't necessarily have physical entities,
Mm-hmm.
but at the same time they're very real. And or
It is
maybe
very difficult to describe.
maybe a better way to put it is, I mean, I think of the Bible passage, and maybe I should have just started there. And I think um you know the Apostle Paul puts it a good way.
Mm-hmm.
And this is in Colossians 1. So it's Colossians 1. I'm going to start with verse 15. Uh, so the Son is the image of the invisible God,
Mm-hmm.
the firstborn of over all creation. For in him all things were created, things in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible.
Mm-hmm.
Whether thrones or powers or rulers or authorities, all things have been created through him and for him. He's before all things, and in him all things hold together. So that's a little bit there. But it's everything visible and invisible.
Yeah.
Like when we think of in the physical realm, what's visible and invisible? Well, visible, hi.
Invisible.
I think I'm visible. I think so. Invisible,
Gravity.
gravity, wind, like all those are very real. They're forces.
Mm-hmm. And we can see the effects of them visibly.
Yes.
But the actual thing itself, there's no way to.
So in the physical, really easy to describe.
Mm-hmm.
Of invisible. Yep, got it. Now you turn to the spiritual realm and spiritual side of things, because heaven and earth. So we got the earth side for, like, I guess the physical. And then you think, okay, well, how about the spiritual, visible and invisible?
A little more difficult.
Well, isn't it all invisible?
Yeah, I mean,
but there's a depth to it. And it just takes the eyes to see it. Because not everybody's going to be able to see it because they're not looking for it.
Sure.
And to be honest, like, it's not easy to find, because I myself haven't really seen a whole lot either. Does that mean I believe it more or less? I don't know.
Inconclusive.
There's value to doubt, but doubt can also be a hindrance.
Sure.
To belief. But there's things that can't be explained in the physical.
Yeah.
Though, when you look at it in the lens of the spiritual, it does make sense.
Sure.
Take, for example, natural disaster, tornado comes, wipes away, and then, like, from the foundations of family's home, and a family was living inside of it and hiding in it as the tornado passed over or through, or whatever you want to call it. Miraculously, the entire family survives when they definitely probably shouldn't have. How do you explain it? Luck?
Luck seems to be a popular answer, but I don't think it's the most reasonable answer.
Or is it something else? You may have heard the term guardian angel before in different things. Or something that I kind of look at as well. And these are your glimpses into the spiritual realm a little bit. People that have near-death experiences.
Sure.
Things like of that nature, or have seen things where other people can't. Some of those things, I think, give glimpses into it. And I've heard different stories, or we've even had Aiden uh, on the podcast earlier who, medical miracles where maybe someone shouldn't be alive right now, but guess what? They're alive and kicking. I've heard different stories of cancer going away as if nothing happened.
Mm-hmm.
Someone's, broken leg healed in an instant, different things like that. You even see some of these in the Bible itself where, oh, I'm just going to touch the hem of his garment, of Jesus's garment, and boom, healed.
Mm-hmm.
And Jesus realized, who touched me?
Mm-hmm.
Because the power came through it. Because there's an intentionality. What did the person who touched the hem of the garment think? Well, they believed that they would be healed at that point. And that's kind of with, and this is where it becomes hard for me. Because you hear, oh, just pray for it and believe that it'll happen, and it will happen. But then there's those times where
Where it doesn't.
it doesn't. And you're like, but God, why?
Fair.
So that's where that little inner turmoil can come. But that's also when you have to realize there is a spiritual battle going on.
Sure.
And all around us is a battlefield.
Mm-hmm.
Not everything is going to go, without complications. Life wouldn't be life without its challenges and, tribulations, trials.
Sure.
And maybe, something that's sad and you wish wouldn't happen to you could possibly be the catalyst for somebody else to believe. That's something we don't know from a 50-mile view outside. It's large, big picture stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So often we can be so narrow-minded and focused in on something so finite where we don't often look to the infinite. Which, let's be real, I don't really tend to look in the infinite lens all too much. I try to at times, but it's quite hard. I don't have this thing called foresight. I mean, relatively speaking, I guess you could call it personal foresight. Like, I can tell if a dumb decision is going to be a dumb decision.
Sure. Especially in regards to yourself.
Yeah. But, like, overall implications and what will happen because of certain actions and everything, like in the intricacies and all that, wouldn't know everything. Because that's like almost like fortune telling and different things like that, which, again, a little bit of a tie into we'll call it unnatural, but call it the spiritual, call it whatever you want. But you're tapping into something else. Like in the Bible, you see some of the fortune tellers, they're tapping into demonic power to kind of prophesy in different ways and, different things like that. But it's like, okay, then you go back to our conversation last week. Okay, what's from God and what's not? Because in the same way, well, God can also do that. Give people visions, prophecies, different things like that. Then it goes down to, okay, so what's the ultimate goal? And that's being achieved by said thing. Is it to build people up or tear people down or separate? Different things like that. So I guess I'll go into something that I've always thought in some way, and kind of how I've seen things. I haven't like physically seen it, but it's the best way I can describe it.
Sure.
And then I'll go into a story I've heard. So, if anybody's heard this, I mean, I guess say it so in the comments, but has anybody heard of the eye is the window into the soul?
Yeah.
Or something around that. And for me, like when I first talk to someone, I look them straight dead in the eye. And then you can often catch a glimpse of kind of who they are. You know, you call it a gut feeling or
Sure.
whatever. You can tell person's good or they have a willingness to learn or willingness to accept Jesus and have a deeper conversation and all that. That's kind of what I feel like. I call it a spiritual fire. So you see the fire candle that's lit in
Sure.
their eyes. And then there's people that are not really open to spiritual discussion and there's no fire in their eyes. It's just deadpan almost. It's really hard to describe a little bit. I think I'm doing an okay job, but maybe you lose me, maybe you don't. I don't know. But it's evangelism for me, for an example, isn't what I would say it doesn't come easy. And one of the things that kind of sticks out for me when I'm kind of, talking with God through it is sometimes he'll highlight the eyes.
Okay.
So whether there's a fire or not. And usually when there is a fire, I'll start having those deeper conversations. And I'm not going to be like forcing the issue at all.
Did you read your homework today?
Did I read
Did you?
But like I'll start like branching out, making more small talk, doing things, just trying to get to know them a little bit
Sure.
more and make it more authentic. I'm not trying to say like, oh, I look at it, it dictates who I talk to. No, I talk to everybody, but with almost like a more intentionality of I need to,
Sure.
this is somebody you should be paying attention to, like in your sphere of influence.
Sure.
And then I guess I'll go into a story that I heard kind of around. It's related to the spiritual realm. I'm not going to give any names because I don't want to give any names away because I never technically asked them if I could use the story, but I'm not going to say any names. So hopefully that's okay. But I was at college. I heard, I'll say her through the grapevine. Not really, but because we group of people were talking about the spiritual side of things, and not all of them were necessarily Christian, and we kind of had this conversation, and I was as I was listening to it, they were describing their sibling being able to see darkness like from certain people.
Oh, almost like an evil.
Yeah, like a like an almost like they could identify evil.
Interesting.
Like it was just like a presence that loomed over them. Which terrified the person in question, which is why they don't really associate with spiritual stuff because they don't want anything to do with it because this is what they see. Or like when they were younger, they saw it a lot more often. So and it's interesting because from the conversation, all it sounded like is they could see evil. Nothing else. They could just see evil, darkness, blackness. I don't know. I can't remember, and maybe this is just me not remembering the full story. I want to say there might have been something where they could see light in good people, but maybe this is just human nature. You remember the bad things instead of the good things. But if it was just the bad, like, well, what is it like? Who's giving the vision?
Well, I
I
mean,
I don't know. But then that gets into a whole other conversation.
I think it's even interesting that you bring that up because I mean, I think it does that with that story in mind. It really does lead into a deeper conversation because you hear people always talking about the popular lingo like, oh, they give good vibes or they give bad vibes. You know, um, what really does that mean, right? You're going based off of a feeling, um, and so I it's just that's what your story reminded me of is like because I do think you can maybe not in the sense that this individual could or at the level, but you can feel goodness or if somebody is giving you know I guess the best way to put it is bad vibes or bad juju or whatever you want to call it. um but it is interesting because it's
But it even going to that, like, there's so many times where people are like, oh, I can just feel that it's
Mhm.
not good, or I can
Sure.
just sense that it's not good. Well, where is that sense
Well, that's
coming
what I'm
from?
getting as is that spiritual. I mean, is that something deeper there? I
Yeah,
don't
and
know.
other people just associate it with, oh, good vibe, bad vibe,
Gut
gut
feeling.
feeling, different thing like that. Well, what sense is it? And are you training that sense?
Well, people
Or
will often call it a sixth sense, right? Which
yeah.
is a term that's notoriously used in
Well,
supernatural
what if that
discussion.
is a spiritual sense?
Sure.
So you have your five senses, right? You have touch, feeling, tasting, all those kind of things. What if the last one's spiritual?
Sure.
It's something you can't touch, but you can feel. Like whether you call it, you could almost call it. Well, maybe you can't. I was thinking like emotional, but it's not the same thing.
No. I think they can sometimes like intermingle, um, to an extent, but I wouldn't call them the same thing.
You know, so if we talk about like sixth sense for like spiritual sense, for example, that's you kind of tapping into the spiritual realm, whether you realize it or not. Um, and there's see, this is just really hard to describe and explain.
Well, and it feels like a can of worms, right?
Well,
Like,
it is a can of worms
because I mean,
because some people
I
are,
say that, but I could be completely off base. I don't know.
and maybe some people are more naturally gifted to tap into that sixth sense,
Sure.
whether to see things physically, like through the visual
Sure.
spectrum at
Well, and
least.
this might even be a reach too, but building off of that, I mean, people who are extremely empathetic, where you almost call them empaths, where it's just like I can just by looking at somebody tell, what they're feeling, what they're thinking, based almost entirely off of, again, for lack of better terms, vibes. Um, and I think there are people who are naturally more empathetic than others. That's not necessarily a good thing or a bad thing, but it leads into that conversation of is that too a heightened.
Well, and maybe even to that, because God calls us to help those who are weary,
Sure.
and different things like that. In some of those cases, is that not God pointing out,
Yeah.
you know, kind of leading and guiding into a direction? And whether they realize that or not is entirely different for each person.
Well, and again, I want to preface: neither of us are experts. I mean, we
No,
could be completely off base here. Um,
but
just speculation.
it's just a fascinating conversation because it's something that not a whole lot of people necessarily talk about. And I'm not going to bring up like, you know, divine, like, I'm not going to bring up the seven layers of heaven and hell or different things like Because technically, there's things out there that have that in mind, and not just Dante's Inferno and stuff like that. But
which is, that's a whole other
that's a whole other thing. I'm not going into that.
serious idea.
Uh,
Deep dive into Dante's Inferno.
but like you can tell when
Mhm.
people are more like, at least for me, you can tell when people are more willing to have a spiritual conversation. And when I say spiritual conversation, I mean mainly about like Jesus and about God and about like salvation and
Sure.
different things like that. I think a lot of people are willing to talk about spiritual things. It's just what those spiritual things look different from people to people.
Sure.
Like, for example, are vampires spiritual things? Like, I guess harkening back to the Creature series a little bit.
I mean, I would argue yes. And I feel like it is weird to me, but I feel like that's almost a more culturally appropriate, or it has become a more culturally
and people are
appropriate discussion
more prone to talk about those things
than
than Jesus or different things like that. So how can you make that almost like a gateway
Sure.
to actually talk about Jesus? I'm like, guess what? You're still engaging in these spiritual things. You're believing in some of these other things.
Yeah, absolutely.
So why is it that you can't believe in like God or different things like that? If you believe in, things that are created in a sense by God, why can you not believe in the Creator?
Yeah. Well, that's a.
But then
there's multiple reasons. It's a much deeper conversation than just potentially, well, I believe in this and I don't believe in that. It's, I think, to an extent, it's even a hard issue.
Well, it gets into the muck and the mire because everything's kind of
all tossed about.
Yeah. I'm like, maybe the best way to describe like spiritual realm is like a fog.
Sure.
Sometimes you have the eyes to see through the fog, and other times you don't. Is your spiritual sense the flashlight or whatever through the fog? How many people have the reader manual for getting through the lost woods? And gotta go this way. Oh, got caught in the fog. Gotta do it again. No, but yeah. So that's one of the stories that I've heard when it comes to terms of seeing the spiritual world, like realm. It's not like seeing anything, but that's more colors than anything
Sure.
else.
Being
Or
in touch with it.
another thing that I heard when I was overseas.
Is this when you were in Israel?
No. This is when I was overseas, Eastern Europe. And one of the stories of what the missionaries there kind of told me is they had other people come from other countries as well, but they said that they could see the army of angels kind of on the ridge, ready to kind of take over the town and free them from the bondage that they're in, from the forces of evil. And so like for one of my days off, I went right underneath the ridge, and like God helped me to see these, like, what is this army that you sent? Like for me, I can feel that there was change that was going to happen. It's just like help me just to see a bit of it.
Sure.
Like, what does that look like? And I could almost sense, again, kind of like the people ahead were saying,
something's going on, or something is going to happen.
The ride of the Rohirrim is coming.
Yeah, it's, my mind jumped immediately to Lord of the Rings. There's a change in the wind.
Yeah, that we think alike.
Yeah.
But it's also funny because at the top of the plateau there's actually wild horses, so it's kind of funny. The ride of the Rohirrim. it's interesting too because I had conversations with people when I was there
Hmm.
that didn't believe the same things or
Sure.
whatever. People are very open to having conversations. Now, in fairness, I didn't necessarily bring up God in the midst of them, but just willing to have conversations regardless. And I can see where, if people are open and willing to have, conversations, you know, you are God's ambassador to them. You don't necessarily have to say, you know, drop everything, follow God.
Hmm.
Well, that's not your job to do. Like something kind of I realized being there, like for the mission field, you're not there to like force anybody into anything. You're just there to kind of be the hands and feet of Jesus. They can see it through you, but they're not going to know what it is. And that's where the questions come. That's like you're just being faithful to what God has called you to do, which is why, like, for example, missions and different things, they take a long time because most of the time, I think, for missions, you're not necessarily doing the one doing the outreach. God is. You're just faithful to kind of wait and listen. Take, for example, Ananias in Saul's conversion back in Acts 9. What did Ananias actually do? Like before this all happened? Well, we weren't really told anything. He
Yeah.
was kind of just in the area.
He's a guy.
He's a guy.
I just work here.
And then God told him, "Hey, so this guy Saul, who's actually uh coming into town, so I want you to pray for him and shelter him, take care of him." And Ananias goes, "Uh,
We're talking about the same Saul, right?
the Saul that's persecuting us, right?" God's like, "Yeah. Are are you sure? Are you you, you you are? Ah,
Me? You want me?
um, any specific instructions?" Do as I tell you. No stalling. Okay. I'm sorry. But then that's when, like, because again, who shows up for Saul? Jesus himself did.
Hmm.
And then he was, blinded and, had all that stuff happen. That's when Ananias showed up. It's after the fact. God's already moved. Missions and for me happen the same way. God moves first. We're there to almost like shepherd them in.
Right.
Because we've had such experiences before and we kind of know how God moves, or at least we should. It gets harder when we kind of blur the lines. And I mean, obviously, we all can be forgetful too. Like, we forget the times, oh, yeah, that's actually when I encountered Jesus for the first time. Like, you tell any of, like, if you're Christian or whatever, tell anybody that you know, hey, when was the first time you encountered Jesus? There's a conversation starter right there. Because I almost guarantee nobody can think of it off the top of their head. Maybe you can, and maybe it was just that impactful for you.
Sure.
But I know at least for myself, it may be a little harder to find.
Yeah.
Does this just mean that we're spiritually numb? Like, what does that mean? And I don't necessarily know the answer to that. Anyway, next verse. No, actually, I'll save that for later. So here's a little brief intro into what we'll talk about next week. And again, these are next week should be a lot more lined up because this week was kind of hard to talk about because physical realm, yeah, it's everything you can see and whatever in real life. Or well, they're both real life. It's just
Physical versus
one's more explainable, and you can use science and different
material
things.
versus immaterial.
Yeah, invisible versus visible.
Sure.
Except, yeah, like for example, like I was saying earlier, like miracles, those fall under the realm of spiritual. Things that exist outside of science,
Sure.
science, and all
Something
that.
that's should be by all logic and reasoning impossible.
Yeah. Like for example, the virgin birth, or resurrection of the dead in some way. Now, obviously, there are instances where medically you can be declared dead and brought back. So I guess you could technically, we resurrected him. It's not quite the same because the resurrection that you see in the Bible, for example, they've been dead for days and then brought back. That's the impossible. Like, there's a reason why the 3-day, 3-night kind of thing, because that was kind of the point at which even they believed, like everybody of the time believed, they're gone. Because they still had this sense of the almost spiritual sense that, hey, guess what? They can still come back within a 3-day period. But it's after that point, then it's impossible. Because then the spirit's left. The soul's gone. Because in their belief, the soul lingers after death for a couple days before departing. And we kind of have the same idea, but not the same things, because a lot of it, I think, has to do with myth and legend and things that they, had during that time. I'm no expert. I didn't live back then. So for me, like, man, when you're dead, you're dead kind of thing. But I also know that there's near-death experiences, different things that happen, or, you do have those instances of, okay, they're medically, dead, their heart stopped. Everything kind of ceases to function and then restarts again. Like after a certain point, they're technically not dead at that point.
Mm-hmm.
They're still living, but what constitutes living?
Yeah.
And then that becomes a whole conversation, and I'm not going into it. Yeah, what does it mean to be alive? The science versus fact. Okay. So I'll end with this because I don't think we can really honestly think of much else to kind of talk about. And this enters into preparing against like the forces of evil, for example. So this is the armor of God, and we'll talk about the armor of God there, which is Ephesians 6. Again, this is Paul writing it, and to me, Paul's a little bit more credible in this because, well, guess what? He's experienced the spiritual side of things. He has a heightened awareness for it. He's like physically seen Jesus after he was gone. Like, that's an experience and a half. And I've heard of people experiencing the same thing where they've seen Jesus. Like, physically seeing Jesus. And I'm like, for me, I can't say I've seen that. Doesn't mean I'm any less spiritual, but God moves in different ways and reaches other people different ways through the spiritual. Like you don't necessarily see it in the physical, but you can, because sometimes those lines get blurred a little bit, and you can, again, kind of like we were saying about like the sixth sense, you can tap into it, or at least God allows you to tap into it to see. Whether that means to point something out, a different avenue to go down, different things like that. It could take various different forms. And sometimes we may not even attribute it to a spiritual influence. It's just gut feeling, reaction, things like that. Anyway, so what do I want to start with? So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with verse 10, and I'm going to go to verse 13 for the armor of God. So finally, be strong in the Lord and in his mighty power. Put on the full armor of God so that you can take your stand against the devil's schemes. For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. Therefore, put on the full armor of God so that when the day of evil comes, you may be able to stand your ground, and after you have done everything, to stand. Now, that brings up an interesting thing, too. I just thought of this, actually. So, we'll talk that out. In the heavenly realms. Now, when we think of heaven, we think of the sky up and hell below, down. But to be honest, the more and more I realize things, I almost think of it in terms of everything's still on the same plane. There's no up or down. It's all in the same thing. Because when it says in the Bible, new heaven and new earth, it shatters both realities.
Sure.
Into a new one, a combined one. Not in the sense of like Legend of Korra and all that kind of stuff. Not talking about that. But to me, like when it says the heavenly realms, it's the spiritual realm.
Mm-hmm.
It's that of the spiritual. So angels, demons, everything like that. Because when people see angels, demons, etc., it's in the same sphere that we are now. It's still on Earth.
Mm-hmm.
We still see them, encompassing different things in and out of, like, phasing out of reality. In and out of reality. Why is that? Because I think it's on the same plane. If you want to think of it in terms of, like, D&D and things like that. It's just a different realm. An alternate reality, if you will. But yeah, it's still very real. And it's happening simultaneously. Like, so if you think of it in terms of, okay, so the alternate reality, everything's a battlefield. Again, good versus evil, all that kind of stuff. And we're still in that world, just in different forms.
Right.
And some are held captive. Some people are held captive. Some people are fending off the enemy. Some people are fleeing. Like all these things are happening at the same time. But in the physical, everything's happening as we know it. And some of the things that may happen, you could potentially attribute to what's happening in the spiritual. It becomes it seems very fantasy-esque. Something very fiction, it seems like. But at the same time, there's things you can't explain any other way than, well, there has to be some other force at play. I don't know why I think this when I think of like fantasy, but I think of like, you have, maybe I think of D&D. That's why, like clerics and different things. Like they cast healing on somebody, and oh look, all of a sudden they're right back up again after being severely hurt. You have miracles that happen in hospital rooms, like things where you shouldn't be alive anymore.
Yeah.
And then boom, all of a sudden, boom, healed. Like there's things like that, and it's not like soldiers get wounded. And if you think of it in forces of good and evil, well, angels are wounded just as much as demons are, in my opinion. And now, obviously, this is going way out of the scope of everything, so obviously take everything with a grain of salt. I'm kind of just talking out of nothing, really. But like maybe some of the things of why things don't happen, maybe the way that we expect them to, is because there is a war going on, and the angel that was supposed to, like, I guess, carry out the prayer that we give was hurt, or different thing, because the enemy is doubling up on it, or different things like that, and things just happen that way. But then God can use that thing that happened, that negative, and yet still turn it for good.
Right.
I don't know. Maybe it's because I'm thinking of it in terms of like a battlefield.
Sure.
And that's always kind of how I've seen it, especially when we get into like the armor of God, where I specifically structured it in a way that it's like a battlefield. But anyway, that's enough of me rambling. You have anything else to add? I feel like this episode's kind of all over the place. Not gonna lie.
Ramble.
Gobble gobble. All right.
Spiritomb versus Regirak. Material versus immaterial.
What's your cornerstone? With that,
Pokemon, gotta catch 'em all. And we just got copyright struck.
and with that, gotta catch them. I mean,
We're not gonna catch them all.
We're not gonna catch them all. We can't catch ghosts. Go Gengar. Okay. Anyway, that'll be it for us this week.
Ghost type Pokemon, real or fake? Bum, bum, bum.
Decide in the comments down below.